Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Kevin Donahue, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. I'm going to begin by giving some remarks about why we're here today. And then following me, we'll have the Attorney General, Carl Racine, speak. Then Peter Newsham, the Chief of Police. Then Michelle Garcia, Director of Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. Then all of us here will be open for questions. Let me start by providing you an update on our Robbery Prevention Task Force. Ensuring the safety of every Washingtonian has been this administration's top priority since day one. I'm proud of the work of all of our public safety agencies and what they've done to keep communities safe. We've doubled down on transparency and accountability with our body-worn camera program. Through our security camera rebate program, we provide rebates for residents, businesses, nonprofits, and religious institutions that install and register a security camera system on their property. And we are focused on training up the next set of police leaders and new officers with new recruitment and retention initiatives. Now let me say some words about the Robbery Prevention Task Force. And through our specialized Robbery Prevention Task Force, we've worked together to get repeat offenders out of our neighborhoods and off our streets. Nearly 2 years ago, I stood with the mayor, then Chief of Police Kathy Lanier, the Attorney General, and Councilmember Charles Allen to announce a new strategy to help us find these criminals and prosecute them. This strategy set out to ensure the best coordination between MPD, Metro Transit Police, the Office of the Attorney General, and the United States Attorney's Office. I am proud that since then, the Robbery Prevention Task Force has helped us work together to develop the strongest cases possible to prosecute repeat offenders. Robberies are down in all 8 wards. More specifically, we've seen a 27% decline in robberies to this time last year and a 35% decline compared to this time in 2015. So it's clear that identifying crime patterns and removing dangerous offenders and weapons is helping us combat crime across our city. And this task force highlights our criminal justice system's strong commitment to violence prevention and making Washington, D.C. stronger and safer. One thing I'd also like to point out is that we're continuing to see a trend of robberies in which victims are targeted after using online resale sites to buy and sell items. The suspects set up meeting locations, and when the victim arrives, a pre-staged robbery occurs. To prevent this type of crime, we set up safe exchange zones. These 3 designated locations in the city provide a safe place to purchase and exchange property. They are the Special Operation Division's Harbor Patrol at 550 Water Street Southwest, the 3rd District at 1620 V Street Northwest, and the 6th District at 5002 Hayes Street Northeast. I'd also like to say it's important to remember, even if you use these safe exchange zones, never meet anyone alone, and never list your home address, phone number, or other identifiable information. Additionally, it is always best to meet during daylight hours. Chief Newsham will provide more details in just a moment. I'd like to close by thanking the brave men and women of MPD for their hard work and dedication. Now I'd like to welcome Attorney General Racine to the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Kevin Donahue. Thank you, Madam Mayor and the Chief. Look, 2 years ago, we gathered on Capitol Hill, as I remember. It was cold and a little snowy that day, and there was a large crowd gathered because there was a spree of robberies that had been going on in the city for the past year. The mayor asked all of the law enforcement partners to get together and figure out a way to be more successful in regards to the prosecution of robbery suspects, particularly those suspects who are repeat suspects. So she gave us that charge. What we did at the Office of Attorney General was to assign a prosecutor to be that full-time juvenile robbery prosecutor. She had a charge, and the charge was to better understand where the gaps in the cases are so that we can firm them up as we're gathering evidence in the first hand and thereby be better able to bring winning cases to court. What we found is that because a lot of the robberies happen so quickly, oftentimes at dusk or dark, that victims have a hard time really recollecting facts and identifying suspects. And so we doubled down. And what we did was we We started relying more on video evidence, phone evidence, social media, and we also were more receptive to the victims of crime. It used to be that we required the victims of crime to come into our office the next day after an event to report to us so that we could draft up the complaint and the charging documents. Well, what was convenient for the Office of Attorney General might not have been convenient for victims that had just undergone a traumatic event. So we found that that flexibility has also helped us in tightening up the cases and bringing the cases. So I want to commend the mayor for bringing us together. And it really is an example of law enforcement partners getting together on a specific problem in order to ameliorate that. The last point I would make is that I know that the mayor and the police chief and certainly OAG have always been out in the community reminding people of what's going on and why it's important for them to be more careful when using their electronic devices in plain sight and in public. And I really think that part of the reason why the numbers are better is not only because of the task force, but it's because people are using more caution in their daily use of electronic devices. It's now my pleasure to bring to the podium Police Chief Newsham, who always says that any failure that occurs with respect to law enforcement is all of our failure to share, and any success is all of our success to also share with the public. Chief?
All right, thanks, Carl, and thanks for your help in this endeavor. We talked a little bit about crime, and I get asked about crime all the time in the city. We have had significant reductions in crime in this city. The thing that I'm most proud of is that last year we reported the lowest number of violent crimes that we've had in the city in about a decade. So far this year, we have another 23% reduction on top of that. That is a significant reduction, and people always ask me, the next question I get, particularly from the folks in this room, is, well, how did that happen? It's a combination of a lot of things, but I'm going to talk about what we're focusing on at the Metropolitan Police Department, and I've said it from the very beginning. The two things we're focusing on is removing illegal firearms from our community and then focusing on the robberies that happen in our community. And the reason we're focusing on the robberies is because that's the largest category of violent crime that we have in our city. It's the one that impacts the most of the residents in our city. And if you look at the numbers, it's absolutely remarkable what has happened since 2015, where we had a slight uptick. The reductions have been huge with regards to robberies. We went from almost 3,500 robberies in 2015 down to about 2,000 robberies so far this year. That's 1,500 fewer victims of robbery in our city. So we put the Robbery Task Force together in December of 2015. This is 2 years of results. As Carl Racine mentioned, the Attorney General mentioned, robberies are an extremely difficult crime to close because they happen very quickly. It's very difficult for victims of robberies to be able to identify the suspects in the case. So one of the things we tried to do with the Metropolitan Police Department is to make sure that we had available resources when pattern robberies occurred in our city. So what happens if a pattern robbery emerges in the city? Our Command Information Center puts that information out to units in the field. The teams that are out in the districts can respond immediately. If they need additional resources, our members of our Narcotics and Special Investigation Division, Criminal Investigation Unit, can move into the area and to assist. So in the event that we do not close the case, then we rely on the forensic evidence that we have that the Attorney General spoke about, and that's video, fingerprints, those types of things that have been left behind. Another piece of our strategy was to get involved with Metro. We actually have a member of our investigative team that sits in the Metro Command Center. If something happens in or around a Metro, a robbery, we can almost send images out immediately to our folks in the field to be able to capture the folks that are responsible. And then the last piece that the Attorney General talked about is with the Office of the Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We've made sure that they have the resources that they need when we do make arrests to make sure that we make solid prosecutable cases. So the folks that are involved in robberies in our community are held responsible. The last thing that I will mention, it is the holiday season. We do rely on our community to also be vigilant when it comes to robberies. Package thefts is an issue that we see. It's occurring in the district and around the region. Things that folks can do is have packages delivered when they're home, have them delivered to a neighbor's home, even have them delivered to their office so they don't leave packages out unattended. Be aware of your surroundings. Like the Attorney General said, far too often we see people walking down the street with their headphones in, looking at their cell phones, not paying attention. We ask that you be a little bit more cognizant in a big city. The camera rebate program, I cannot tell you how valuable it has been for us on the Metropolitan Police Department to have these cameras capturing suspects involved in this type of behavior. It's really been a part of what we've been able to use to close a lot of these crimes. And then lastly, like the Deputy Mayor said, the safe exchange zones. If you are going to buy something on the internet and you don't know who you're buying it from, there is a potential that that person may be a bad actor. You can go to one of our safety exchange zones, either at our Harbor Division, here at the 3rd District, or at the 6th District, and you can make that exchange with the police in your presence to make sure that it's safe. So thank you. I'm going to introduce Michelle Garcia from the Office of Victim Services, and she's going to say a few words.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chief Newsham. The Chief mentioned the Private Security Camera Incentive Program. The camera program is an opportunity for every resident, business, nonprofit, and religious institution in the district to play a role in making the district safer and stronger. Through the rebate program, residents, businesses, nonprofits, and religious institutions can purchase and install cameras onto their properties, register them with MPD, both in an attempt to deter crime, but also, as Chief Newsham mentioned, assist MPD in those cases when crime has occurred. Through the voucher program, residents who receive public assistance may be eligible to receive a camera system at no cost to them. Since the program has launched in February of 2016, over 3,000 applications have been approved, and over 8,000 cameras have been funded throughout all 8 districts of throughout all 8 wards of the district. For district seniors, as well as individuals with disabilities, they may be eligible to receive a camera system at no cost through the DC Office on Aging Safe at Home program. We really encourage everyone in the district to play a role in making the district safer and stronger. And for more information, you can visit our website at ovsjg.dc.gov.
Now we're open for any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, Mayor, I was talking to some neighbors who live near Zaire Kelly. Remember, he was killed in the Brentwood area, and they said Chief Newsham has police officers there. They're a little concerned about lighting change, some of the shrubbery taken back. Are other agencies within the government also helping to fight crime? I know by chance when we went by there today, one of your personnel was out there, somebody representing your office just happened to be there. But do you instruct some of the other agencies to do things to also help police in these type of crime-fighting techniques, whether it's replacing lights, whether it's cutting back brush?
Well, of course. And so I think you know, Matt, that we every month, just about, or every 6 weeks or so, I do a community walk in one of the wards in the District of Columbia where I have all of the agencies that might impact the lived environment for our residents join me. And in between the walks that I conduct, we have core teams, which is what I think you saw out in Ward 5 today, where the liaison from the mayor's office, the MOCR, will ask different agency heads or different agency personnel to join them on very specific issues. So working with community leaders, looking at 311 calls, that guides both sets of walks, the ones that the MOCRs conduct and the ones that I conduct. So we would need to just get a little bit more information from you. I'll talk to our Ward 5 folks to see what they came up with. But we're very focused, actually, and I know Kevin and his team have been working with Zaire's family on things that we can do to better ensure safe passage for young people to and from school. So as our work in that area proceeds, we'll keep you in the loop. Yes.
Mr. Racine.
Yeah.
I came to talk to you, Carl, a couple months ago about juveniles and the robberies. Do you have any numbers handy by any chance to show your success in convicting juveniles? Because I know that there's a lot of juveniles that are committing these robberies. Do you have a percentage of this 2,036 that may be juveniles and how successful you were with convicting them?
I actually do not have those numbers with me, but Paul, I know you're a person that's going to stay on the question, so I invite you to sit down with us, and we'll go through the numbers that we have with you.
Okay, is that it? Yeah, sure. Anything else?
Mayor, I'd like to ask you, now that Chief Newsham has revealed that the Use of Force Board has ruled the shooting of Terrence Sterling unjustified, where do you stand as far as the civil suit? Do you have to talk with Mr. Racine about what to do about that? And do you have any plans to just settle it at this point?
Well, certainly we are pleased that the board has reached the conclusion that it did. I think there's another level of appeal that the officer could engage, but I've said early on that I thought it best that the officer separate from the department. And just like other legal matters before the district, the Attorney General and I consult on those matters, and I know he wants to tell you where things stand with this particular suit.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And of course, you accurately described the relationship that we have in regards to suits against the District of Columbia. We always keep the mayor apprised, and she's very well engaged in matters that could lead to settlement. With respect to this particular suit, my heart goes out, of course, to the family. I think it's best for us not to talk in specifics about the case. Suffices to say that in all difficult cases, and this one is incredibly difficult, it's been my view that the best result for the city often involves a fair resolution that's fair to the family and fair to the district, and that's the way I would seek to proceed here.
Can I follow up? I know that in this suit, your attorneys have been telling the attorney and the family that up until today that we learned that it was unjustified, that it was justified. If it is ruled unjustified, does the city really have any leg to stand on to continue to fight the suit?
Yeah. So in cases that involve, alleged police misconduct, we work very hard to filter out those cases where there has been some wrongdoing from others where, frankly, the facts are in dispute. It's the cases where the facts are very much in dispute that eventually end up getting litigated, probably throughout a court process. Those are the kinds of distinctions that we're seeking to make right now, and that will dictate the course of this process. Again, I think a result that's fair for the family and fair for the district is out there to be had.
So, Mr. Attorney General, can you just clarify, does your office now concur with NPD's findings that this was an unjustified shooting? Can you say one way or another what your office's position is on this shooting right now?
I really can't because I've not studied that determination nor the basis therefore, but certainly the determination is going to be relevant to the approach that we take in regards to the case.
And then, Chief, could we just ask you to kind of explain to us, I know you were on some other TV channel already talking about this, but for the rest of us, could you tell us exactly
Sound a little bitter there.
Me? Bitter? Please, never in the holiday season. Could you just run us through kind of what happened to now and then what goes going forward, where we stand?
Yeah, the process that we have for these cases is one that it's actually a model for looking at serious uses of force, and it was actually developed through our memorandum of agreement that we had with the Department of Justice. So the way that the system works is initially the U.S. Attorney's Office will look at the case to see if there's any criminal implications. The standard that the U.S. Attorney's Office has for that is a very high standard. They have to determine that there was criminal conduct, and they also have to determine that they think that they can successfully prosecute that case before they proceed. The U.S. Attorney's Office in this case issued a letter of declination, which means that they didn't feel that they could meet that standard. It was handed off to the Metropolitan Police Department for an internal investigation. That investigation is required by law to be completed within 90 business days. That investigation was done by our Internal Affairs Bureau. When that investigation is completed, it's handed off to our Use of Force Review Board. That group looks at the case and all of the evidence that's been gathered by the Internal Affairs Division and some of the information that's been gathered by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they make a determination as to whether or not MPD policy was violated. In this case, they determined that policy was violated, that the shooting was unjustified. From there, it's handed off to our Disciplinary Review Office, and what they do is they send out a notice of proposed adverse action with a recommendation for termination. That's given to the member, and then the member gets to make a decision as to whether or not they want to have a hearing on that matter. So that's where we are right now. That hearing is likely to occur, if it does occur, probably in about February.
So can you tell us what policy he violated?
I don't want to. Here's the position that I'm in. I don't want to get into too many specifics. That information will become available once there is a final, once this thing is final. But at this point in the proceedings, let's say that it goes to a hearing and there's an outcome. If the member wants to appeal that outcome, that appeal comes to the chief of police. So I'm in a very precarious position where I can't make any comments about the specifics of the investigation or any of the facts. I have to keep an open mind in the event an appeal does come to me.
So can I ask you procedurally then, where we are right now, the recommendation to terminate, that goes to you?
That goes to the member, and then the member decides whether or not they want to have a hearing, an open hearing.
So do you have any choice right now? Do you have any choice right now yourself as chief to reduce that?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then if you go to the board and the board comes back and makes a recommendation to you, do you then have the choice to, if they recommend termination?
It sounds like you have some information about this stuff. So I think what you're getting at, after the board comes up with an outcome in the case, correct, if the member appeals to me, I cannot increase whatever that penalty is. I can only decrease it. And that's by way of precedent. That's the way that our disciplinary process has worked by decisions and outcomes that have occurred in other matters.
Was there just one violation of protocol, or was there an abundance?
Steve, I'd like to talk about those details, but I think if I were to do that, I could potentially impact the outcome in this case, so I'm going to stay away from that.
Did you notify the family about this determination?
One of the difficulties when a family files a lawsuit like this is it impacts our ability to communicate with the family. I will say this about the family. I did meet with the family early on before the lawsuit was filed. I am very empathetic to the fact that they have lost a son. They have been incredibly patient throughout this entire proceeding. And I know during the holiday season it's probably particularly difficult for them not to have their son around.
Chief, if Officer Traynor is terminated, will you seek to prevent him from holding another police officer job with any other department?
I don't want to make any predictions on outcome at this point because of my position that I'm in as the chief of police. I have to keep an open mind. So any type of prediction that I were to make could be misconstrued and potentially impact the case.
Separate question. Do you have any reaction to the reassignment of Principal Reeves at Ballou High School, and also any words of support for Dr. Jackson at his first day at Ballou High School?
Well, certainly, and thanks for that question. We spoke, I guess it was middle of last week or maybe late last week, about launching an investigation into allegations that were reported about Ballou High School as it relates to attendance and graduation. We worked very quickly in getting some kind of initial assessments of how the investigation should proceed and leadership at Ballou. So Chancellor Wilson has reassigned the principal, put in place a new principal, and is working with the team to make sure that there's as little disruption to the children as possible. Meanwhile, our Office of the State Superintendent, which is our Department of Education and Regulator, has commenced the investigation at Ballou and the review of policies and procedures across the district. They have hired, I think they have signed and are working with a firm that is nationally recognized for this type of work so that we can get to the bottom of it. So obviously our interim principal, we want him to have every success. We want families to be supportive. We want the children to be mindful of all that he says and does because he has their best interest at heart, and we're rooting for them to finish the year strong.
Can I follow up there?
Sure.
So has DCPS hired an outside firm to audit Ballou?
OSSI, Office of the State Superintendent.
Has hired an outside firm?
Yes.
Because at the press conference, I recall you guys saying that it was going to be done internally. So this seems
I don't think actually we said what was going to happen because we were very fresh with the news. So we spent the following day, I don't remember now what day that press conference was, focused on how to best get the work done. The state superintendent determined that she needed help and she wanted a nationally recognized firm to assist the department.
Is that to audit simply Ballou or the entire, because I believe OSSI was going to take a global look at the entire school system, correct?
They're
Is the outside firm auditing simply Ballou or the entire?
They'll be involved with both an investigation into Ballou and the review of attendance and graduation practices district-wide.
My last question on this, I appreciate it. In the press release, it said that the principal was reassigned to other duties in the district. Can you be more specific about that? What is the former principal of Ballou?
I think she's been reassigned to the central office. I'm not exactly sure what her task is going to be. Yes, I'm sorry, you were cut off earlier.
Very much, I appreciate it. Since the press conference last week, we've heard from the whistleblowers in the WAMU and PR report, and they had shown us emails that were sent. They had a meeting with DCPS leaders and said that when they sent an email trying to follow up, that none of their concerns were addressed. This was after graduation some 6 months ago. Can you please respond to that?
I haven't seen it. I think I did see a report that said there were some emails sent. I saw a report that there was some testimony at the state board. And I think also Chancellor Wilson found that there was some information provided in a grievance. So that's what I know. I haven't seen the email. So tell me what exactly you want me to respond to.
The fact that these teachers are claiming that their accusations of being pressured to change grades or they get bad reviews, these were made about 6 months ago.
I'm not aware of that. And I think last week when we spoke, I certainly relayed to you the information that I had, and that was that the reports that we got came from press reports. And so I would be very interested to see if that wasn't accurate at the time. When did we get them and what actions were taken? What form did they come in, for example? How direct they were? Were they really about accusations about grade changing or graduation? I'm not exactly sure. But what I can say is we do know now, and we have acted very quickly to make sure we have a firm who knows how to get to the bottom of questions like this on board, and we're hopeful that we can turn around some answers soon. Yes, sure.
Chief, regarding that fire in Southeast DC today on 3rd Street, any information there about the victim, what transpired there?
I think the victim was in his 50s. We don't know exactly what happened. It looks like he has survivable injuries. So there was an assault. The injury from the assault was not that serious. but there was some smoke inhalation. So he's in pretty serious condition right now, but he's expected to survive.
The circumstances behind that, can you shed any light?
I can say that there was no forced entry into the home, so it appears like there was some dispute that occurred while the victim was in the home with someone else. I can tell you this, I just talked to my homicide commander, and they handle all of the arson-related assaults, so it's not because it might be a homicide. And he was telling me that they've made some pretty good progress in the case.
Can I just get one thing clear, Chief and Mayor? As far as Traynor is concerned, I've been asked this question, and I don't know if I know the exact answer to it. Mayor, do you have the power to just outright fire a police officer? And if not, does it have to go through the trial board because of the bargaining, the bargaining contract?
Yes. Yes.
Do you think our city today is safer than it ever has been in your lifetime?
Definitely in my lifetime.
That's 21 years.
That's 21 years. You're talking to somebody who lived through the crack epidemic of the 90s, and what is otherwise a fantastic neighborhood in Washington, D.C., where we have seen just homicides that have been through the roof. You're talking to a ward council member who has worked on issues like we've discussed today, where we see robbery sprees from time to time. We see repeat offenders. We see people getting arrested and getting let out and doing it again. And I have also worked with just really wonderful police leaders, officers, and lieutenants who've worked hand in hand with communities to drive crime down. I think the Attorney General was absolutely correct in saying all the pieces of the public safety puzzle have come together around this robbery issue. And Pat, the reason why your question is important is because obviously we can track a lot of numbers. I personally believe that robberies scare people more than anything else because when you have robbery sprees, they are seemingly random and they're seemingly involving people who are otherwise not involved in violence or any other criminal activity, and they become victims. And their sense of personal safety and security is assaulted either by walking on the street or being in their car. And so robbery and the trajectory of robbery drives, in my view, people's sense of safety in the district. So we really threw everything we had at this situation 2 years ago, and I'm proud to see the very significant reduction in robberies. So you heard about the police resources we put in place, our prosecutors who have been very focused on it, the U.S. Attorney's prosecutors have been focused on it. Metro had tried new tools that have worked. We are using tools like our security camera rebate program, and we're asking residents to be more vigilant. So until we get to zero, we won't be satisfied, but that's a big reduction.
Safer today than ever before.
Chief, how long? You've been doing this for 28 years.
It's the safest I can remember. And here's the thing, you go to communities and folks don't feel safe if something happens in their neighborhood. So we still have work to do, no doubt about it. But we are in a very good position in Washington, D.C., at least in my experience here. I know you've been here for how many years, Pat? 71, yeah. So that's a little longer than I have, but we're in a really good spot.
Sir, can I just ask you, what do you feel the impact?
Last question, yes.
What do you feel the impact of the board's decision will be on the city?
The board's
with regards to Terrence Sterling?
Let me just start off before I kick it to the chief. What's important to me is that we have kept trust with the public. So we know that we had a very unfortunate circumstance where a person died. We know we had to work outside of our system with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that took longer than any of us wanted it to take, but they came to a decision. And now we have our administrative process that we follow in the district. So what I hope the community understands is that we've done exactly what we said we were going to do in being transparent and following the law and seeing it through until the end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There we go.